All right, good evening. I was supposed to do this when we had a snow day, so it's been a bit, but I wanted to start it out with another one of those Bible project videos that we did on an early class. This one's about sacrifice and atonement. I think it's pretty good, so I'm trying to start out with this and play it. If I hit play, will it come up on the screen?
Long for the world to be good, for people to live in peace, act with love and justice. But
I can hear it.
Do
I need to do something different? You want me to put it, copy it, or put it in a... Do I copy the URL or just the video? Oh, so there's no way for us to do it at all?
I don't think so. I don't know why.
Okay, well.
Oh, wait, no, I see your mouse.
There's upper left-hand corner.
You saw it?
Your arrows in the upper left-hand corner.
Yeah, he's got it on there.
Can I see?
You're not wireless still, are you? Or is it a hardline connection?
There you go.
Yeah.
Liberal genius.
Big screen. Yeah, perfect.
Okay, let me
All right.
just run back.
Yeah. It's not up there now. It is on here.
Why'd you go back? That's weird. There, that should stay.
There it is. Okay, perfect. Stand by for technical difficulties.
No, we already had those.
All right. You ready to hit play? All right.
the world to be good, for people to live in peace, act with love and justice. But there's a problem. Something compels us humans to constantly wreak havoc and destruction instead, and we call this evil.
And from the Bible's point of view, evil ruins things in at least two ways. There's a direct effect of our evil, like when someone steals from another person, they've created injustice.
And therefore, they owe something to make it right.
But there's another indirect effect of evil, because they've also ruined the environment of the relationship, creating a lack of trust, there's emotional damage. It's like vandalism, and they need to make that right, too.
Now, many people believe, hey, God is good, he should be the one to just get rid of all the evil in the world.
But let's be honest, the evil that I see everywhere out there, it's the same evil that's inside of me. We have all contributed, and we keep doing it.
And so this kind of puts us in a bind. If God's going to rid the world of evil, he'll have to get rid of us.
And this is what's so remarkable about the story of the Bible. This God is so good that not only is he going to rid the world of evil, he's going to do it without destroying humanity.
So how is he going to do that?
Well, early in the story of the Bible, we're introduced to the animal world. I should be removed. But God is allowing this animal's life to be a substitute. It's symbolically dying in my place. The biblical word for this is atonement, which means to cover over someone's debt. But there's a second part to this ritual. Remember, evil also causes this relational vandalism. And in the Bible, this idea is described as polluting or defiling the land and making it unclean. So the priest would symbolically wash away the vandalism by sprinkling the animal's blood in different parts of the temple.
So the animal's blood is cleaning things?
Well, remember, this is a symbol, and it's a symbol that we're not used to. The blood represents life, and the sprinkling of the blood is this representation of how God is cleaning away these indirect consequences of evil in their community. In the Bible, this process is called purification. And so the temple and the land now become a clean space where God and his people can live together in peace.
So this ritual makes things right between Israel and God.
And more than that, the Israelites experience God's love and his grace through these symbols. And by being forgiven, ideally, this would compel them to become people of love and grace too.
Right, that's the ideal, but it wasn't always happening.
Right. So the prophet Isaiah, for example, he talks a lot about this. He opens his book by saying that the continual sacrifices of the Israelites had become meaningless because they were also allowing great evil in their midst, ignoring the poor and the oppressed. Even the Israelite kings were distorting justice. But Isaiah looked forward to a day when a new king from the line of David would come and deal with evil, but in a surprising way. The king would become a servant, and not just serve, but also suffer and die for the evil committed by his own people. And his life would be offered as a sacrifice.
And this is the promise Jesus believed he was fulfilling. He's the King of Israel, suffering and dying on the cross.
In fact, Jesus himself used Isaiah's words when he said that he came to serve and give his life as a ransom for many. And that word ransom refers to his sacrifice of atonement. And so all over the New Testament, we hear about how Jesus' death was an atoning sacrifice for us. It covered the debt that humans owe God for contributing to all of the evil and death in his world. But the New Testament authors also talk about Jesus' death as providing purification. And so we hear about Jesus' blood as a symbol of his life, having this ability to wash away the vandalism that evil has caused in us and around us, so we can now live at peace with God.
So that's the meaning behind Jesus' death. But there's more to the story.
Yeah, the New Testament makes this powerful claim that Jesus' death was not final. He rose from the dead. And so he's the sacrifice who broke the power of death and evil, which means that he lives on to offer his life to anyone who will accept it. He is the perfect sacrifice to which all the previous sacrifices were pointing all along.
So because of Jesus, the early Christians stopped participating in the ritual of animal sacrifice.
But they were given new rituals. There are two that Jesus taught his followers to perform. The first is called baptism. Just as Jesus died, so going into the water becomes this personal connection you now have to his death. And in coming out of the water, you, so to speak, come back to life with Jesus. So baptism is this sacred ritual that joins your story to Jesus' death and his resurrection. The second ritual is called the Lord's Supper, which is a reenactment of Jesus' last meal with his disciples, and he used bread and wine to portray his coming death as a sacrifice. And so now, followers of Jesus, they take the bread and the cup regularly to remember and to participate in the power of Jesus' death and in his life.
So these rituals, they remind us of God's love and encourage us to live a life of love and grace.
But they do more than that. They connect us to a new life source. The very power that brought Jesus back from the dead is the same power that can deal with the evil in our own lives and transform us into people who lead lives of love and peace. Hi, this is Tim.
And this is John.
We believe the Bible is telling one...
So, I don't like everything about that, but there's some good stuff in there. And especially the two topics that are tonight's lessons from chapters 16 and 17. And that's atonement and blood. So, let's get into it. Chapter 16 is all about the Day of Atonement. Right? And I counted 16 times in this chapter the word atonement. One time it was atoning, but it's the same a word. in Hebrew, pretty much. Just the form is different, right? And 49 times I counted atonement in Leviticus. So 16 is about a third. So about a third of the time atonement's mentioned is mentioned in this chapter. And you might know atonement as Yom Kippur. The Day of Atonement is Yom Kippur. We even hear that today. That's the Jewish holiday. That is the Day of Atonement, Yom Kippur. Yom is day. Kippur is a form of the Hebrew word for atonement. It's really kafar or kofar, K-A or K-O-P-H-A-R or K-O-P-H-E-R. Spelled a couple different ways I see in this study. But it's Strong's Hebrew word 3722 if you want to look it up. And it means, just like the guy said, to cover over, right? Or it can mean to pacify, appease, make propitiation, make reconciliation. And what I found was there was a lot of variations of the Hebrew word in the Old Testament. But they all come back to this basic form, which is kafar. And they all mean about the same thing. And the only thing that changes is the tense of the word or the way it's used in Hebrew. It's kind of a little different. So some of the other ones that I saw words, the synonyms were kind of forgiveness, to forgive or to purge, to reconcile, to put off, to atone, to be merciful, make reparation, make restitution, to restore, to recompense, to redeem, redemption, redress, those type of words. The ones that popped out the most were propitiation or some form of propitiation. And then there's some words that are similar to that that show up. But that's basically what atoning or atonement is to cover over. And it's from this word. Now, it's a concept that we often, get. It's hard to talk to some people about it because it's hard to understand. Like there's this whole, I think there's this mentality that it's at some level we have to earn our salvation, but this word itself is showing us that it has nothing to do with what we do, right? Even doing the act of the sacrifice isn't where the atonement is. The atonement is coming from God. We're not doing it. God's doing the atoning, right? And so when I'm looking at this word, something else popped out at me. So let's read 16 verses 1 and 2 real quick. It says, "Now the Lord spoke to Moses after the death of the two sons of Aaron, when they offered profane fire before the Lord and died. And the Lord said to Moses, 'Tell Aaron your brother not to come at just any time into the holy place inside the veil before the mercy seat which is on the ark, lest he die. For I will appear in the cloud above the mercy seat.'" So 2 times the mercy seat is mentioned in that verse. Guess what mercy seat is in Hebrew? Kapareth. It's a form of kippur. It's a form of atonement or propitiation. So a lot of places it's translated kind of like as the lid of atonement, or the atonement cover of the ark, or the atoning cover, or the atonement plate, right? So that spot, that spot on top of the Ark of the Covenant, where the 2 cherubim are covering each other, is called the mercy seat. It's the spot, it's the place of atonement. It's the lid of atonement, because that's where God exists in the cloud and where he does the atoning from, right? So I found the mercy seat in this chapter happened 7 times, and about 27 times in the Old Testament. The vast majority of them, I think 18 of them, were in Exodus when they were talking about this part of the ark. The lid, mercy seat, right? So it's also mentioned in the New Testament. The first place I found was Hebrews chapter 9, verse 5. So we'll go there first. Hebrews 9. verse 5 reads, "And above it were the cherubim of glory overshadowing the mercy seat." Okay? So that's the same in New King James Version. In most versions I found it was mercy seat. Some versions do have, like I said, they have the atonement lid or something like that. But most of them have mercy seat. But I wanted to look up the word in Greek, because in Hebrews it was written in Greek, right? So the word in Greek is hilasterion, which is Strong's 2435 in the Strong's Greek, and it basically means propitiatory. I don't even know if I can say that word right, but it's the propitiation place, or the place where propitiation happens, kind of thing, right? It's a derivative of propitiate, obviously, right? And that's the strong, propitiate is the strong word hilascama, which is Strong's 2433, and that's the one we get from Hebrews 2:17, which reads, "Therefore, in all things he had to be made like his brethren," that's Jesus, "that he might be a merciful and faithful high priest in things pertaining to God, to make propitiation for the sins of the people." So that's the Strong's 2433 hilascoma, which is propitiation or propitiate. All right? And then so the strong word in between 2433 and 2435 is 2434, and that's hilasmos. And we see that in 1 John, and again, it means propitiation. The one that jumped out at me was from Luke. So that middle one that I was talking about, the most basic one, the 2433, which just means propitiation, which is the same as the one in Hebrews 2, verses 17, shows up in Luke 18:33. No, 18:13. Can't even read my own handwriting. So Luke 18, and verse 13, if you remember, this is the story of, or the talking about two different people praying in the open, right? 18:13. Yeah, so it's the parable of the Pharisee and the tax collector. So the Pharisee, I'll read the whole thing. So also Jesus spoke this parable to some who trusted in themselves that they were righteous and despised others. Two men went up to the temple to pray, one a Pharisee and the other a tax collector. The Pharisee stood and prayed thus with himself, "God, I thank you that I am not like other men, extortioners, unjust, adulterers, or even as this tax collector. I fast twice a week. I give tithes to all that I possess. I give tithes of all that I possess." And the tax collector, standing afar off, would not so much as raise his eyes to heaven, but beat his breast, saying, "God, be merciful to me, a sinner." Okay. And then it says, "I tell you, this man went down to his house justified rather than the other, for everyone who exalts himself will be humbled, and he who humbles himself will be exalted." So the humble man, the tax collector, wouldn't look up to heaven, beat his breast, and said, "God, be merciful to me, a sinner." That word merciful is the same word, merciful. So he's saying, "God, make propitiation, cover over my sin," basically. So there's mercy involved with the propitiation, right? That's that blew my mind a little bit. I was like, wow. But the whole thing goes back to the middle one of the Greek words, which is hilasmos, 2434 in the Strong's, and it's the one that's used in Romans 3:25. And Romans 3:25 says, "Whom God set forth as a propitiation by his blood through faith to demonstrate his righteousness, because in his forbearance God had passed over the sins that were previously committed, to demonstrate at the present time his righteousness, that he might be just and the justifier of the one who has faith in Jesus." So this propitiation is the act that Jesus did to demonstrate by his blood, dying on the cross, demonstrates his righteousness and made him be our justifier and make us just, right? So that's all, it's all tied up in that propitiation, that atonement, that covering over, right? So this when I'm studying this chapter, I'm just all over the place with this word, and this word just keeps blowing my mind, like how much it means, how deep it is, and the fact that it's used for the mercy seat itself. Anybody have any thoughts on that? Because it made me, it just was so a big part of this whole atonement, the Day of Atonement, that it's the thing that I just kept going down the rabbit hole on. I'm like, wow, you know. The other thing I noticed about the, anybody have anything? No? Questions, concerns, comments? No? The other thing that I noticed in chapter 16 was notice verses 13 and 14. In verse 13 it says, "And he shall put the incense on the fire before the Lord, that the cloud of incense may cover the mercy seat that is on the testimony, lest he die. He shall take some of the blood of the bull and sprinkle it with his finger on the mercy seat on the east side, and before the mercy seat he shall sprinkle some of the blood with his finger 7 times. So I don't think I've ever noticed that before, but he's actually sprinkling blood on the Ark of the Covenant as part of this Day of Atonement, right? The blood and the atonement are linked right there, which brings me to the next chapter. Chapter 17 is basically about the sanctity of the blood and the importance of the blood, which the two guys mentioned in the video. You know, blood is life, right? There's one more thing in chapter 16 that really caught my eye, and that was the fact that the Israelites were told to afflict their souls. Right? They were told to afflict their souls that Day of Atonement. And anybody have any thoughts on what afflict your souls really means? Or anybody have any thoughts? Every time I read it, I think like it's supposed to be a solemn day of like a Sabbath day, but times 365, I guess, or times 52, because you're supposed to be that deep in confession and understanding how much that you have sinned and how much you need God to do something about it, I guess, is kind of how I take afflict your soul. But from what I understand about Yom Kippur now, they kind of take that to mean there's some fasting going on. Like they're afflicting their soul. They're supposed to fast on that day. I don't know. To me, it seems like it's that kind of an event. If it's only happening once a year, this is the biggest. Day of Atonement is the biggest thing that can happen to you spiritually as an Israelite every year, right? It's the day where the high priest only takes care of not only his and his family's atonement by the sacrifices he's supposed to do with the bull and the goat and the scapegoat, right? We know about the scapegoat. There's a whole thing going on there. But he's also taking care of all the Israelites' sin as well with the scapegoat, right? They sacrifice the one goat, and the other goat he puts all the sin on, and they take it out of the camp, right? It's taken out of the camp and released, not sacrificed, right? But that symbolism of putting all of Israel's sins on that scapegoat and then leading it out of the camp is a huge, visual for the Israelites, I would think, and then the other goat is, of course, sacrificed. And bull, yeah.
I just looked up real quick to get a definition, and it's kind of the direction I was thinking. It says causing pain or suffering to afflict or trouble. So maybe what they were supposed to do is look at their souls from how it's troubling God, and what their deeds are doing is causing the pain and suffering that God sees.
Mm-hmm. I like that.
Self-examination, that would be the direction I would head.
Totally. I think that's all what I always thought. Like you needed to be, that self-examination is the idea, right? That looking in and realizing how, how much I missed the mark. How sinful I am, and how much I need God to do something for me, because I can't do it. I can't do it, right? And that would be kind of looking at the pain that you're causing God and others from your acts, So, yeah, that's good. Thank you.
Well, look at the pain you're causing yourself.
Exactly. Part of the affliction would be, it's afflicting your soul. So it's like you're kind of doing that thing where you're going, look at all the damage I've done to myself and others and God from the relationships with all of those, and my missing the mark,
I think that's what Paul was talking about. Why do I keep doing these things that I know I shouldn't be doing?
Yep. And I can't do the things that I know I should.
That's the struggle we all face every day.
Yeah, amen. Totally. Yeah. So this atonement and the blood sacrifice, the blood atonement, brings us into chapter 17. That's where we're talking about the sacredness and the life that's in the blood. And so let's continue. The first time God, he told Noah this same thing about the blood, that the blood is life, back in Genesis 9, verses 4. And Genesis 9 was right after the flood, right? And he came out, and chapter 9, verse 4 reads, but you shall not eat flesh with its blood, that is, you shall not eat flesh with its life, that is, its blood. Surely for your lifeblood I will demand a reckoning. From the hand of every beast I will require it, and from the hand of man. From the hand of every man's brother I will require the life of man. So not only talking about the importance of human life and how murder is not right, but drinking or eating the blood of not just human or animal, but any blood whatsoever, right? Which is what we get from Leviticus chapter 17. We get more of that. Let's see, what do I got here? Notice that the blood, I've talked about it before in chapter 16, he sprinkles it in the Holy of Holies at the mercy seat. He also, the high priest does that on the Day of Atonement. It's also sprinkled at the altar. That's verse 6 of 17, I believe it says that. And the priest shall sprinkle the blood on the altar of the Lord at the door of the tabernacle of meeting, and burn the fat for a sweet aroma to the Lord. So that's one time. Well, that's the priest, not the high priest, is putting it on the altar, sprinkling it. Also, back in chapter 16, verses 18 and 19, we see some more blood. It's put on the horns of the altar with the fingers, and sprinkled on the altar with the fingers by the high priest on the Day of Atonement. So 16, verse 18, and he shall go out of the altar that is before the Lord and make atonement for it, and shall take some of the blood of the bull and some of the blood of the goat and put it on the horns of the altar all around. Then he shall sprinkle some of the blood on it with his fingers 7 times, cleanse it, and consecrate it from the uncleanness of the children of Israel. I found it interesting that it was 7 times. I saw that a couple of times, that the sprinkling was 7 times. I always find that the number 7 fascinating. It kind of indicates God's number or completeness or something special about 7. Anybody have any thoughts on that, on 7 times?
Get lost in numerology
Real quick, yeah. So let's not do that, right? Okay, but in chapter 17, verses 6 and 11, we get the reminder that blood was used for atonement. That's what it's used on the Day of Atonement and with the sacrifices. It was an atonement thing. So let's read verses 11 and 12. 11, for the life of the flesh is in the blood, and I have given it to you upon the altar to make atonement for your souls, for it is the blood that makes atonement for the soul. Therefore I said to the children of Israel, no one among you shall eat blood, nor shall any stranger who dwells among you eat blood. And then I found 13 very interesting too. Whatever man of the children of Israel or of the strangers who dwell among you who hunts and catches any animal or bird that may be eaten, he shall pour out its blood and cover it with dust. Draining the blood from the animal you're going to consume, and you cover it over the blood. Cover over. So it's kind of an interesting irony of atonement, right? Because you're covering over the blood with dirt, and the blood is covering over us with the sacrifices and on the Day of Atonement, or for them, for the Israelites, right? So it's just, again, every time I look at it, it goes deeper and deeper, right? Verse 14, let's go for verse 14. It says, for it is the life of all flesh. Its blood sustains its life. Therefore I said to the children of Israel, you shall not eat the blood of any flesh, for the life of any flesh is its blood. Whoever eats it shall be cut off. So life is in the blood. Over and over again, life is in the blood. The blood is the life. It sustains the life, right? So, there's kind of and thank you, anonymous person who helped me come to this part of the lesson, because it really helped the way that you presented it to me to think about it like this. So, the price or weight of blood. So let's talk about a cow or a bull. A cow or a bull has about 10 gallons of blood in it. 10 gallons, right? A goat and a sheep or a lamb have between 1 and 1.5 gallons in it. Okay? So humans also, like a goat, sheep, or a lamb, have about 1 to 1.5 gallons in them. So each of us has about that amount of blood in us, right? So, start thinking, do the math, do the numerology. Start counting in your head how much blood was spilled every day for the sacrifices that were done at the tabernacle, at the altar. They do one in the morning, they do one in the evening, they do whoever comes up and says they have a free will offering or whatever. You start doing the math. It's a lot. It's a lot of blood spilled, right? A lot of blood spilled. And so I want to turn over to 1 Kings, 1 Kings chapter 8. 1 Kings chapter 8, verses 63. First Kings 8:63. It says, and Solomon offered a sacrifice of peace offering, which he offered to the Lord 22,000 bulls and 120,000 sheep. Okay? So the king of all the children of Israel dedicated the house of the Lord. So this is the temple dedication. Solomon made the temple, he's dedicating it. And he kills, 22,000 bulls and 120,000 sheep. So 22,000 times 10 gallons, 220,000 gallons. 120,000 sheep times 1.2, we'll just do right down the middle, 1.2, right? 144,000 gallons of blood. So just for this dedication of the temple, 364,000 gallons of blood. Mind-numbing, isn't it? That's a lot of blood. And that's just one day. Remember, they were doing sacrifices every day for hundreds of years before this and for hundreds of years after this. Right? So it's a lot of blood. It's a lot of blood weight, blood price that was used to atone for their sins, right? And basically, it's just covering over. It's not taking them away. It's kind of pushing it forward, right? Like the guy said in the video, it all points to what? the one sacrifice, the perfect sacrifice that Jesus did for us, one human, so at the most, 1.5 gallons of blood. 1.5 gallons of blood over on here is this much weight, and it outweighs all of this other animal sacrifice blood and the weight of our sins. All right? So it just shows that the preciousness of Jesus' blood, that 1.5 gallons that he was willing to spill for us, outweighs any of the stuff that we've done and all the attempts that we have made to try to make it right. We can't pay for it. We can't. There's never enough weight on this side of the scales, right? But his 1.5 gallons of blood weighs it out, makes it even again, right? It's the scales. And that's basically the concluding thought that I have on this lesson tonight. Anybody have any comments or questions? Yeah?
Back up a little bit, I just think it's interesting. Talk about the affliction, and they had the Day of Atonement where they were with their soul. And then just 5 days later, they had the Feast of the Booths. And they're told then that you shall rejoice before the Lord your God for 7 days. You shall celebrate as the feast of the Lord for 7 days in a year. So it went from this affliction and their sins, and then after that was done, just 5 days later,
Rejoice.
they were rejoicing in celebration. So just that contrast, I think.
Once they're atoned,
Yeah.
they can have joy and rejoice and celebrate. Yeah. Thank you. That's excellent. Good thought.
That kind of pairs with the Lord's Supper and how we examine ourselves, but it's with a spirit of gratefulness.
Yes.
It's already
The bittersweetness of it, right? We understand the cost and the price of that blood, but it also gives us cause to have joy and rejoice and celebrate the fact that it was offered for us, right? That we get the reconciliation, the atonement that it brings, right? Excellent. And that brings me to the assignment for the next class. I think next Wednesday, Eric's doing part 2 of their adventure in the Holy Land, and I look forward to that on next Wednesday. But in 2 weeks, we're going to have the last one about Leviticus, and it's on you to do the homework for that class, because basically I want the lesson to be about how Leviticus connects to Jesus and how Jesus connects to Leviticus. Any connection that you can read the whole book of Leviticus, and while you're reading it, try to get as many connections as you can to what's pointing at Jesus. How does this connect to Jesus? How does this relate to Jesus, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Because there's tons in there. And the more I look at it, the more I'm finding. And even the comment about the Lord's Supper makes me think of some of the connections that started with Leviticus about Jesus and his time on earth and what he has done for us, right? So it's your assignment. You got 2 weeks to get as many connections as you can. Let's see if you can get more connections than I got. That's the challenge. Anyway, thank you. I'll leave you the lesson. Oh yeah, here I wrote it. Leviticus plus Jesus. Connections, foreshadowing, prophecies, parallels, points to, correlations, indications, how Leviticus prepares us for Jesus. All that stuff. That's your homework. 2 weeks. All right? Was that? That's all right. I already said it basically, but